Alright, I need to have a talk with Gust, Koei Tecmo, or whoever is in charge of how you pronounce game titles, because I am really bugged that the newest Atelier game is now pronouncing the word Atelier Atelier. Pick Atelier, pick Atelier, just pick one and stick with it. Alright, now that I have that out of the way, it's time for a video review of a new Atelier game, with me staying politically correct with this pronunciation even though I don't personally agree with it. Not part of the Dusk series or the Arlen series, part of the new series that is leading into the newly announced Atelier Fierce game. Here is my review of the PS Vita and PlayStation TV version of Atelier Sophie, the Alchemist of the Mysterious Book. The plot of Sophie revolves around a young girl named Sophie that lives in a small church-based town called Kirchenbell. Sophie is continuing the work in an atelier that her late grandmother ran as the town's alchemist. While she's still experienced and new, Sophie is trying to learn her best to learn alchemy and finds a teacher through a strange flying and talking book that appears inside the atelier itself. The book has no memories, so Sophie agrees to help it find and recover all of its lost memories in exchange for it teaching her how to perform alchemy and improve her skills so she can be a good resource for the town. Now the story is pretty casual, fun, and cute, as Atelier is best known for, but much of the latter parts of the story really go a little bit out of what Atelier normally goes through and comes a little closer to other RPGs. Not a lot, but it's more than previous games of the series has had. Sophie, like previous games of the series, is a turn-based RPG heavily based around time management and item creation through alchemy. Fans of the series know how this goes, but things have changed quite a bit since the previous games. First, time management. In past titles, every major story event had a time restraint. You had to get everything done by a certain date. You only had so many days to get this made. Sophie completely takes that out. You have a story event and you can take 5 years to do it, and the game will not punish you in the slightest bit. Instead of this, the time management system is implemented in that there are different days of the week and different times of the day. When you go into a dungeon, different monsters or items will appear to gather or be fought depending on what type of the day you go in and what day you go in. Now let's get on to main progression. The story progression comes in the form of the book's memories. Every memory is based on an alchemy recipe, while you have other recipes that will unlock all the time in your book based on certain items you get. Every memory has a specific requirement to fill up its gauge to launch the recipe and the next story event. One memory might require you to fight monsters over and over and over again until the gauge is filled up, while the next memory might require you to donate money to the local church or craft specific weapons. There are a couple sections of the game where you don't have to do this for memories, one being the end and one being a halfway point big story event, but that's kind of there to just switch things up so you're not always just grinding for memories. Next thing we need to talk about is traveling. You have a point-to-point world map where you can travel and time passes as you're moving around. Atelier fans are very familiar with this. And there's also a town map with a quick travel option where you can move around to various facilities like the blacksmith to craft weapons, the grocery store to buy food, or the cafe to take side quest requests from citizens or look at rumors to make specific items or monsters trigger for a set time. The new element to travel is called fatigue. When you leave the town, everybody has an LP gauge that is full. Whenever you perform an action, the LP gauge decreases a little bit. An action could be harvesting an item, fighting a battle, or just moving from one dungeon to the next. The lower the LP gauge is, the weaker your party becomes. Now the final things we need to talk about are combat and crafting. Combat is pretty much the same. You have turn-based battles, you have physical attacks, you can use items, you can run away, and you can use MP gauge to use skills. Big thing that's changed is the support actions. In previous games, once you fought for a while in a battle, you were able to do support actions like doing an extra attack from an ally or supporting an ally by essentially becoming a meat shield to take a hit for them. This is still in the game, but this is in the form of offensive and defensive stances. Whenever a character chooses their command, you can set them to one of these stances. If they're an offense stance, as the attack chain goes up, they have a chance of performing a follow-up attack. And if they're in a defensive stance, as the chain goes up, they have a chance of taking a hit for another ally. Now, the final thing we wanted to talk about with the main gameplay is the ability and weapon and armor crafting systems. The ability system is something that happens when you reach the level cap. The level cap of Atelier Sophie is 20. So when you get close to the end of the game and you hit level 20, you can't level up anymore. Instead, you gain ability points when you level up. Ability points can be used to, as you would guess, purchase abilities. Abilities for each character could be upgrading their skills to more powerful forms, permanent stat increases, or character-specific passive abilities like Monica's Goddess Shield that permanently reduces all damage she takes and permanently increases her evasion rate. These abilities are key to getting yourself strong enough to take on the final bosses. Weapon and armor crafting is in the form of traits. Every material you find in the game has traits. Traits could be from attack increases, HP increases, reducing how much MP you have to use for a skill. It could be increasing the price of an item. When you craft your weapon or armor, the materials you use can pass on those traits to the weapons or armor. So when you're getting closer to the late game areas and you have all of the high tier armor and weapons available, you have to be careful about what materials you use to make sure it's beneficial in combat. A sword that only has a high price trait isn't going to help you much in combat, rather than a sword that has attack and defense increase and HP super enhance. Finally, we'll talk about the difficulty and length. Atelier Sophie, sorry I keep screwing that up, is not an easy game. Even if you set the game to easy mode, the difficulty spikes are going to hit you quick and fast. Now finally is the length. I finished the story of this game after I'd been playing for about 42 hours. I did waste a few hours here and there looking for materials that were incredibly easy to find that I just didn't realize, but I would still say this is going to take you at least 40 hours to get through, especially if you want to do all the character events to get everybody's ultimate weapons to be prepared for the final boss. Then after you beat the game, you have the option of saving clear data, which gives you access to doing anything you missed, as well as a post-game dungeon and boss fight. Now we go to presentation. Visually, as all Atelier Vita games do, it looks fantastic. When you play this on a PlayStation TV, it looks like you're playing a PS3 game. Gust and Koei Tecmo have always done a great job at making their Atelier games look beautiful. Performance is getting better for the series for their Vita versions, but there are still a couple problems. First is the frame rate. There are much fewer frame drops in Sophie than, say, Eska and Logi or Aisha, but there still are a lot of frame drops, especially when you're in combat. A couple of the dungeons have some frame drops in them when you're moving the camera, but the majority of the frame drops are going to be when a battle spawns and when you're doing animations in the middle of battle. The other thing is the same song and dance as previous games that I've already mentioned. There are more voiced Japanese scenes than voiced English scenes. Atelier Sophie is only 2 GB in size and doesn't require an extra 500 or 600 megabytes of download for the Japanese voiceovers. There's plenty of space here to be able to do a full English voice work. But, just like the past games, there's probably 2 or 3 times as many Japanese voiced scenes as English scenes. Which is really a shame because the same voice actor who does Nepgear in the Neptunia series does Sophie, and she does a great job. Atelier Sophie is definitely one of the most user-friendly Atelier games to date. On the downside, the Vita version still suffers from occasional frame drops in combat and an incomplete English vocal translation. But if you can suffer some drops in battle, this is a great game for fans of the series and also a very good starting point if you're new to the world of Atelier. Reviews to go. rates Atelier Sophie an 8 out of 10. If you'd like to comment on this further, feel free to below, or head to the website at www.reviews2go.com. You can also visit the site to look at my PlayStation TV compatibility list, updated almost every day, or you can hit up the slides and head to my Patreon page.